Today's lesson is going to be a bit of a mixture. I'm going to go over some of the stitching that we did last time because I know it was quite difficult to see. This time I'm going to do it without the light on, so at least you'll be able to see what I'm stitching, only for a minute. And then I'm going to talk about some of the threads because a lot of people have been asking me about threads and I don't know what kinds of threads you've already got. So if I just show you the things that I use and the way that I use them, I thought that might be helpful. And then we'll get on to stitching on felt, the moment you've all been waiting for, I think. So I'll go down to my machine now to show you. So, first of all, here's the same little bit of fabric that I was stitching on, only I haven't got the machine light on today so that you can see better what's going on. So, just so that you can see how I did it, I'm just going to retrace the work that I did, but now I'm doing it in the other colour. Because when I did the first bit, I had the midnight blue thread in. And now I've got the one that's brown and yellow. I think I might have it a little bit too loose. It's bobbling up a little bit. But then again, this fabric is, as I've said before, it's very closely woven and quite rough and tough, and it can deflect the needle. Now here you can see how, I hope you can see how, I'll take it out and show you. I'll just do one more row. How nicely having these variegated threads can work if you are very careful with them. Oh, scissors, hang on. Here I've been stitching with the brown and yellow one, and just by sheer coincidence, but rather than happy accident, it started off brown in the centre, and as I went outwards, the gold came through. This is why I like the variegated threads, so I would probably leave that. It looks like a little shaded area. So there we are, that's stitching for those who couldn't quite see through the light last time. One thing I did think, actually, I've talked about threads, but what about needles? I always use these metallic Madeira needles. They are for metallic threads, but I mean I don't really use metallic threads very often. I do sometimes. This is one of the kinds of metallic threads that I use, a Madeira FS. But I don't tend to use it on felt, unless someone's asked for a specific thing with a bit of a frosty looking highlight or something. It's absolutely lovely, but I did actually wear a terrible groove in my sewing machine using tons and tons of it when I first started in the enamel, because it is actually, I think it has a polyester core, and then it's the minutest little strip of metal wound round. And I did see that once when I first started scanning my embroideries. The resolution was amazing, and you could scan right in and you could actually see that construction of the thread. But anyway, that was just for fun a long time ago. So, but anyway, these needles are excellent because they have a big eye, and I got so used to using them that when I started to use other needles, ordinary ones or ballpoint ones perhaps sometimes, I was a bit irritated by them because the eye was small. So they are very good. You can get them from Silken Strands. Here's one I prepared earlier. This is open already. So they're quite, I'll just take one out. I don't know if you can, well, you probably can't see the size of the eye. But anyway, you can see that they're nice, generous eyes. Easy to use for those of us whose eyes are not quite as sharp as the needle. Right, so some other kinds of threads. Now this is beautiful variegated thread, but it's quite thick cotton, but it's very nice for stitching on felt. But it is a bit tricky, it does tend to bunch up a little bit. And it's from a company in England in the north called Oliver Twists, and they dye their own and they're absolutely lovely. I have some big ones here with lots on, but they're even thicker. And I had a lovely brown one, but it's been hetted, I'm afraid. However, I am gradually working my way down through the hetted bit, but they're quite pricey. I think those were nearly £10 each. and actually I haven't used them a lot. I do like to use them for hand stitching because, again, being variegated, if you do a little French knot, you can get sort of several shades of French knots, you know, just with the one thread. So those are Oliver Twists. Perhaps I'll have a go with those and show you. This Oliver Twist is thick, and I have an attache rayon in the spool, so I wouldn't want to keep that because it is a little bit fine for the Oliver Twist thread. So I'm going to find a spool that has some cotton in it. And this is all a bit of an experiment. It's not even as thick. The cotton in the spool isn't even as thick as the Oliver Twist thread. And I don't actually know how it'll behave on the cotton. But we'll give it a whirl and see, and then you can have a look. So I'll whip that one out. I love this machine because it's so very easy to thread. I got it second hand from someone who'd made some vestments for the Bishop of Chester, and she had bought it because she wanted 2 or 3 machines on the go, so she didn't have to change threads, and she was actually selling 2 of these, and if I'd been wise I'd probably bought both of them. Ooh, I'm not doing very well. I'm going to have just put the light on for threading the needle. After all I said, apologies for the big elastoplast on my hand. I made a roast dinner for my friend's birthday yesterday. That's what she requested, a roast chicken dinner. And it isn't a roast chicken dinner, or a roast dinner I should say, until you've got a burn on your hand, is it? Off the oven. Anyway, here goes. Now, in the video last time, I made great play pulling that bottom thread through that, from underneath there, and actually I was wrong. I think it's best to keep it on at the top like that when you start. So if any of you have been having any, oh, I don't know, maybe not. Oh, it was when I'd done this, sorry. Dear me, what an idiot I am. Right, so, sorry, pull this through. I meant at this point, don't pull the top one back up through the spool. Right, fingers crossed with the Oliver Twist thread. Oh, yes. Now this is a nice variegated one as well. So you'll see in a minute that the other colours will come through and surprise us. I'm just going round and round and round. And actually I'm going over the same place quite a lot, so it's building up quite a nice thick area of texture, so that's something you could try. The possibilities are endless, as they say, with machine embroidery, and we can all just do our own thing. So that's quite a nice effect with the Oliver Twist. And the one thing about that, of course, is that it's matte. And I quite like matte on the matte felt, but I also like shiny on the matte felt as well. I'll just have a look at the back. Oh, it's not too bad. The tension was probably right because it hasn't gone through to the back too much. Now, you may have noticed a little break in proceedings there, in which I made a complete mess of what I was demonstrating and broke my needle, so it was a good job I brought them downstairs. Anyway, I wanted to show you a little trick with having interesting textures on the surface. So I put a very thick machine embroidery thread on the bottom spool. It's this. It's a kind of, I haven't got the original spool down here with me, but it's a kind of very loosely spun, what am I doing? You want it in front of the lens, don't you? A loosely spun rayon-y thread, and it's too thick to put in the needle and it would shred. So I put it in the spool underneath. And I've turned my fabric over. That's the right side. Sorry, no. That's the right side. And I put it the other way up because I've done a little bit there to practice, but I'll show you again what I did. So I've got a thin... Now these threads, by the way, this one is a thin Madeira polyester machine embroidery thread, and I bought 4 of them from a friend who was selling them, and I don't like them at all. So I just use them when I don't want them to notice. I just don't like they have a kind of glassy look, which doesn't, plasticky look really, which I don't like. Now, I've altered the tension on the top to quite tight, because what's going to happen now is that the the thread underneath, we don't want the top thread showing. So I'll just show you first of all. So I'm on the back of the work here now, and I'm going to stitch. You still have to do the usual thing of pulling the thread up from underneath, on the top now, isn't it? And you can see it's a very thick thread, it doesn't want to come through. And that's what will happen when we're stitching it. It shouldn't come through to the top. It should stay on the bottom, which is why I've turned the fabric upside down. Because the bottom is now, oh dear, I'm making a mess here. Right, let's just see. So here are both of the threads on the top. Down with the lever, start to stitch. Now, as you can see, I'll just trim off the end so that you can understand that. The green thread isn't showing at all now on this surface, but it's creating, I won't do too much because I don't want to risk, you have to be very careful, your machine sometimes gets a bit cross at this kind of thing. Right, I'm going to stop now and trim and trim. And now you can see that on the right side, the thick thread from underneath has stayed underneath, and the yellow thread from the top hasn't really gone under because I've got it on quite a tight tension. So that's another little effect that you can do, but do remember to turn your fabric upside down. So I'm going to put mine back the right way around now. And I talked about the Burmilana thread, so I'll just show you that one of those now to finish. So I have to change my spool now because I don't want that thick thread in there. I'll put the yellow cotton one back in the bottom that I had before. Here it is. It doesn't match the one on top, but never mind. Are we too near? I'm going to see if I'm zoomed in too near. There we are. So that goes in the bottom. Don't forget to put the tension back to a comfortable... Ooh! Oh, that's because a lot of this fell off the spool. This is the Madeira thread that I'm not too keen on. I don't know, it has just a plasticky look. I should have been warned when I saw the tray of threads that there were some bright yellows and day glow colours, and I should have thought, well, no, they're not really for me though. They're nice colours though. I mean, that's a nice one, isn't it? I mean, I love teal. And they weren't so expensive, but they're not the kind I like. If you want a nice Madeira thread for machine embroidery, this is a nice one. This is Madeira Cotona, which I suppose is cotton. So that's a little bit like the Oliver Twist one. I think I won that in a competition, a raffle or something. Where's the Burmilana gone? Here it is. So the Burmilana that I was talking about the other day, it's kind of woolly, and I've been looking on the Silk and Strands website, which I put a link to on the blog, and they do still sell a bit of it. And the new thing that is called Laine, or Laine, I think, the new version of it. And it's wool and acrylic, so it's quite again, it's a fluffy and it's a bit of a tricky thread, and not least to actually get through the needle. So I'm going to have to, I'm awful really, I don't use a needle threader. I spit on it, which is really not hygienic, but then I chop those ends off. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put the light on again. I have to remember to put it off this time, won't I? Well, I've almost decided that Burmilana isn't worth the trouble that it causes, because I've broken my needle, I've messed up my sewing machine, I've been away ages, and I'm just going to have a stitch with it, and if it doesn't work, I think we'll give up with it. But I thought it would be good fun for you to see my mistakes as well as my triumphs. Right, now, woo! You see, it really is a very naughty thread, but the effect is so lovely. And once you get it going with it, it's quite nice, but it takes a lot of, woo! It takes a lot of slapping into. So I'm not going to persevere with that unless you're really good at this. And I'm supposed to be really good at it, but I'm not really good at Burmilana. So anyhow, it's there, and I have obviously used it. Look, the back's an absolute mess. I have used it with good effect before, but you could try if you wanted to use it underneath. And talking of using things underneath, when I went upstairs, I came back down with a piece of work that I made a long time ago, which is rather difficult to see. I might have to sort of pan along it. I think I'll zoom out a little bit. Or when I say zoom out, I mean I'll move the camera back. It's a piece that I did as a kind of portrait of a map of the village that I live in, and it's long and narrow. And this bit here where the hedges are, you can see, was done with that technique with a boucle thread underneath, and then I just coloured in lots of areas and stitched in all different ways. So it's quite a good, well, it's like a homage to machine embroidery, isn't it? That one there was done with a very loose tension and a thick thread underneath. So the loops, can you hear? The loops are all standing up, and they're just lots of different bits of machine embroidery, which I did enjoy. And this part here again is done with a boucle thread underneath in the spool. And there are all the houses and the fields. Put a lot of velvet on at the beginning. I just coloured the backgrounds with aquarelles because it's not going to be used for anything. That was a very fluffy thread that I used underneath. I think it was a tremendous battle, a lot of it. That's a piece of felt, so you see I did have a little bit of felt in my early work. And then this is just an all-over bit of stitching in all different directions with the variegated threads. So, craft kit is stuff to weave with. Always have to have something cheap in there, don't they? And I'm going to make it into a decorative cord. So I'm going to move my width control to not quite the full width. So you can you see the needle going over that side and it'll go over the other side. And now I'm just going to hold, I've got all the threads together. So there's one of those Madeira threads on the top, which I said I didn't like, but I thought it'd be alright for this. Underneath is one of the Natesh threads because they're both the same thickness. So there's a pale blue and a teal, and the string is just natural colour. The foot's down, and I'm just going to start stitching. So I'm just going to hold both ends of the string really tightly, and I've got all the threads at the front. So I'm going to start, because I haven't got the bulb on, the machine isn't starting. Right, there we are. And I'm overlapping the threads and pulling gently through. I can go a bit faster if I want. And in some areas I could, instead of moving it along, I could keep it close together. When it gets long enough, I'll bring it back to the front to show you. So here we are, a little wrapped thread. You need to sort of roll it to get it back to cylindrical. And what you can do is turn it round and go the other way now and go over it again. And then in fact I would turn it the other way up probably, because the pale thread underneath mixes with the dark thread on top. And in some areas you can kind of go back and forth and get a nice thick area. Don't have it even all the way along. This is only a very brief introduction to this technique, but it's another thing that you could add to your embroidery. I made a wall hanging, and I did some pieces where I'm turning it over again now, where I went over and over the same bit. I'll do it now. Until it became so thickly encrusted with thread, it made a sort of bead and it wouldn't go under the machine anymore. But I think I'll just lift that up and turn it over so that it's a mixture of the threads again. Going over and over these. Now it's getting really thick now, so it makes a nice little bump in the thread. So the only thing with this, you've got to be very careful to cut all the ends off, because it can look a bit of a mess if you're not careful. Oops. And there we are. Roll it a bit to get it back to being cylindrical again. And you can use these little threads and things to applique your work if you wanted to. Obviously, that's just a very quick version, but you know, you can do something far more complex than that. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, stitching on your felt. Now, I'm going to stitch on the first piece that I made, which was this one. And I can just put this in and stitch because I'm quite experienced, practiced, I should say. So I'm going to put the, instead of putting the felt straight into the sewing machine, I'm going to put this stuff. It's supposedly stitch and tear, but it isn't stitch and tear, it's a cheap version. Stitch and tear is a really nice stabiliser to use under flimsy fabrics. And when you've stitched on it, it crisply tears away, but this doesn't crisply tear away, it only goes in one direction. Stitch and tear is better than this, but for this particular process, it's absolutely fine. So I've got a really big hoop. Now, in my ignorance, I once thought a big hoop was a good idea, but you still, because of not having to keep changing it, but you still have to change it when the hoop gets over to the right-hand side of the machine and you've not got any more places to go. Anyhow, I'm not putting the felt into the hoop, I'm putting a fabric into the hoop first, just to give you a background for if you're a bit nervous about your machine embroidery capabilities. So, it's there and it's in the hoop. Now you could use a bit of, just a thin bit of muslin if you like, or some thin calico, or some thin cotton. But obviously if you're going to stitch, when you finish stitching on felt, you get a very nice surface that's a bit sort of stretchy. But if you were going to stitch on this and it's going to keep this harsh surface behind it, you're not going to get the same qualities of stretchiness. So, you know, just have a practice like this, and then later on perhaps you could, when you get better at it, you can think about stitching freely on just on the felt. Perhaps I'll show you before and after. So, stitching on the felt, if your surface is fairly even, it's not too difficult. But if you've got lumps and bumps, you have to be very careful about not going underneath them. And, of course, the fabric is thick. So, I'm just going to make a start now. So, just as, we don't want that on width anymore. Just as every time in the past you've done your machine embroidery, pull your threads up from the bottom. Now, perhaps I'll just outline this little bit of brick red here. And you can see what's happening. The machine is pushing the stitches are pushing the felt down flat. And I think that's one of the nicest things. Now, some of these areas are quite fuzzy, so you can define them in any way that you like. Please stitch on your first piece that you made for practice. Just keep it for practicing ideas. I'm just going to go around that again there now. And you can see already that we're getting quite a nice raised area there. That could be a leaf or something. You might want to work just intuitively like this, which you can do when you're practicing, because you don't have to worry about the outcome of this one. This is your sampler, really, your sampler piece. Nice to do little circly areas, because what's in the middle of them will stand up. Well, that looks like a pig's trotter, not a pig's ear. So I'll just alter it a bit there. And that's the nice thing about it, you can change the shapes by just adding bits of machining and defining the shapes. So you can see now, just take that out to show you, nothing wonderful here at all, just some little funny little shapes. I wasn't thinking, I was just stitching. Now you can see how that's gone down considerably, hasn't it? That area, it's quite flattened, so that means when you stitch around here this will have quite a nice textured area. And on the back, of course, if you wanted, you can cut off this stabiliser when you're finished. Be very careful not to cut the felt. In fact, I would probably take it out. And now I'm just going to do some stitching without the hoop, just to prove to you that I can do it. So you can pull this stuff off, but it does tend to distort the fabric a little bit. It doesn't pull off very easily, and if your work's quite delicate, it could make a mess of your stitching. But anyway, and I don't want the back all covered in fabric. I don't mind a few bits left on, but I don't want the back of it all covered because you get a nice texture with your stitched felt. I'll change colour now, and I'll use one of these unpleasant Madeira machine embroidery threads. I don't know why on earth I bought them. In the next class I'm going to show you when we take one of your pieces that's one of your special pieces, the first piece of felt that I made with colours on, and I'm going to show you how to design on that, how to prepare without just jumping in like I've done here, or how I do it anyway. I mean, it's not exactly a design, it's more planning for stitch. I've noticed some really lovely felted backgrounds on Flickr group again, and some amazing machine embroidery. It's so wonderful when I see everybody who hasn't done it before, and they're all practicing and getting very excited about it. So I've done some of this yellowy stitching with this mustardy coloured thread, and I'm just going to show you some little circly bits now. Remember I showed you how to do spots. So I'm just altering the machine up here. Again, I'll show you. Altering my width setting as I'm using it and making the dots. Now, on the bit of calico that I showed you where I've made dots, they weren't completely perfectly spotty, so but what you can do is go around them, and actually I quite like going around them with hand stitch when I've done them, but I'll just show you on the felt how nice it is. You see, I've just got to quite a lumpy bit there. This will become more apparent when you are using your piece that has pre-felts on. That will be more complicated to do, so we're not going to get onto that just yet. So I've got some little dots in it. It's quite a nice foil for the matte surface, isn't it, to have the little dots and spots and things. Now, some of you, if you're working on felt that's very uneven, I mean, maybe in some areas, maybe it's not properly felted together, or there's a bit of a hole in it, you can use some of that stabiliser underneath. Just put a little piece under there just to hold it while you work on it. Anyway, I think that's enough stitching for today, so I look forward to seeing your practices and your bits and bobs on Flickr. I wonder if anyone's used that card technique that I showed you over your machine, if your machine can't be set for darning. I'd love to see some photographs of what you've done and see if it works and hear back from you. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on, well, next week one day. Bye.